Most people believe that respect is something you demand with loud words, physical dominance, or constant displays of confidence. That belief is not only false, it is dangerous. The individuals who are feared in the deepest sense rarely raise their voices, they rarely need to threaten anyone. Their power comes from something much quieter, absolute control over themselves. Human beings instinctively test one another. Sometimes those tests are obvious, but more often they are subtle. A sarcastic comment, an interrupted sentence, a broken promise, a dismissive tone, or a joke made at your expense is often less about the words themselves and more about discovering your limits. Every reaction you give becomes information. If you react emotionally, you reveal where you can be manipulated. If you remain calm while responding with certainty, you communicate something far more intimidating. You cannot be controlled. The greatest mistake people make is believing that strength is measured by intensity. They think anger proves courage, when in reality, uncontrolled anger usually reveals insecurity. People who lose emotional control hand over power to whoever provoked them. The person who triggered the reaction now understands exactly how to influence future behavior. This is why emotionally disciplined individuals command such natural respect. They force others to question themselves rather than enjoying the satisfaction of controlling the situation. There is an undeniable psychological effect when someone refuses to become emotionally predictable. Others begin watching their own behavior more carefully because they cannot anticipate the response. History repeatedly demonstrates that leaders who maintained composure under pressure inspired greater loyalty and caution than those who ruled through constant intimidation. Calmness has a strange effect on the human mind. It creates uncertainty, it forces people to reconsider their assumptions. While loud personalities demand attention, composed personalities quietly dominate it. They understand that every unnecessary explanation weakens authority. Every desperate attempt to prove strength suggests doubt already exists within. Self-control begins long before conflict appears. It is built in ordinary moments through habits of discipline, the ability to delay gratification, control impulses, keep promises to yourself, and maintain consistent standards develops an internal stability that others immediately recognize. People often believe confidence is something projected outward, yet genuine confidence originates from private victories that no one else sees. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, you reinforce your own belief that your actions are directed by principles rather than emotions. That belief eventually becomes visible without requiring words. When someone attempts to disrespect you, your first responsibility is not protecting your ego, but protecting your judgment. Emotional reactions narrow perception, calm observation expands it. Ask yourself why the person behaves this way. Are they insecure, seeking validation, testing boundaries, trying to gain approval from others? Once you understand motivation, you stop taking every insult personally. Instead of reacting like a victim, you begin responding like a strategist. The strongest individuals rarely confuse emotional satisfaction with effective action. They know that winning an argument is often less valuable than preserving authority. Another overlooked aspect of self-control is consistency. Respect cannot exist where behavior constantly changes according to mood. If you tolerate something today but punish it tomorrow, people become confused about your standards. Confusion invites further testing. Predictable principles, however, eliminate uncertainty. Others know exactly where your boundaries exist because those boundaries never depend on temporary emotions. Consistency creates reliability, and reliability creates trust, even among rivals. Ironically, people often respect strict but fair individuals more than kind yet inconsistent ones. Silence also becomes a weapon when guided by self-control. Not every insult deserves an immediate response. Many provocations survive only because they receive attention. When you deny emotional fuel to someone seeking a reaction, their strategy often collapses. This silence is not weakness or avoidance. It is calculated restraint. It communicates that your emotional state cannot be purchased with cheap provocation. Few qualities are more unsettling than encountering someone who refuses to surrender inner peace under pressure. Finally, understand that fear of disrespect is never created by making others afraid of your anger. Anger fades quickly, and people eventually adapt to it. What truly influences behavior is the realization that your standards are firm, your emotions are disciplined, and your decisions cannot be manipulated. Such a person becomes difficult to exploit, impossible to predict emotionally, and increasingly valuable in every environment. People naturally become cautious around those who demonstrate unwavering self-control because they understand they are dealing with someone whose strength comes from within rather than from appearances. That is the foundation upon which lasting respect is built, and it is the reason disciplined individuals rarely need to demand respect at all. Their presence alone quietly persuades others that disrespect would be an expensive mistake. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing that every act of disrespect deserves an immediate response. They argue, defend themselves, explain their intentions, and desperately try to convince others that they deserve better treatment. What they fail to realize is that attention is a reward. Whether the attention is positive or negative, it still feeds the person who's testing your boundaries. Human beings repeat behaviors that produce results. If every insult earns your emotions, every provocation earns your time, and every act of disrespect earns your energy, you have unknowingly trained people to continue treating you that way. The first rule of psychological power is simple. Never reward behavior you want to eliminate. People often imagine respect as something won through debate. They think that if they explain themselves clearly enough, the other person will suddenly recognize their value. Reality works differently. Those who intentionally disrespect you are rarely confused about your worth. They are observing how much poor treatment you are willing to tolerate. Every explanation becomes evidence that they still control your emotional state. They are no longer focused on what they said, they are focused on how you reacted. This shift is where power quietly changes hands. The strongest individuals understand that boundaries are not communicated through speeches, they are communicated through action. A person who repeatedly interrupts you during conversations learns nothing when you complain, but learns everything when you calmly stop giving them your attention. Someone who constantly breaks promises learns little from another warning, but learns a great deal when they lose access to your trust, your time, or your cooperation. Human psychology responds more deeply to consequences than to criticism. Words appeal to logic. Consequences reshape behavior. Many people fear creating distance because they confuse boundaries with cruelty. They believe saying no makes them selfish, ending one-sided relationships makes them heartless, or refusing disrespect makes them arrogant. This fear keeps them trapped in cycles of manipulation. In truth, boundaries protect dignity rather than destroy relationships. Healthy people rarely become offended when you establish reasonable limits. Those who become angry are often the very individuals who benefited from your lack of them. Their frustration is not proof that your boundary is wrong. It is proof that the old pattern no longer serves them. Another subtle form of rewarding disrespect is over-explaining yourself. Every unnecessary justification invites negotiation. When you repeatedly defend your decisions, you unintentionally signal uncertainty. Confident people understand that not everyone deserves access to their reasoning. They can politely decline an invitation without composing a lengthy excuse. They can leave unhealthy environments without announcing every grievance. They understand that explanations are gifts, not obligations. The less desperate you appear to be understood, the more seriously people tend to take your decisions. Silence is often misunderstood as weakness because modern culture celebrates constant reaction. Yet silence, when chosen deliberately, creates psychological discomfort. People expect resistance, arguments, or emotional displays because these reactions are familiar. Calm withdrawal disrupts those expectations. The individual seeking conflict suddenly receives nothing to work with. Instead of controlling the interaction, they are left confronting uncertainty. Few experiences are more unsettling than realizing someone has become emotionally unavailable to manipulation. There is also an important distinction between forgiveness and permission. Forgiveness may free your own mind from resentment, but permission allows harmful behavior to continue. Many compassionate people confuse these ideas. They forgive endlessly while changing nothing about the relationship. As a result, disrespect becomes routine rather than exceptional. True strength combines understanding with accountability. You may choose not to hate someone, but you also choose not to keep rewarding actions that diminish your self-respect. Over time, people develop reputations without realizing it. Some become known as individuals who tolerate anything because they fear conflict. Others become known as people who quietly remove themselves the moment respect disappears. These reputations influence future interactions before a single word is spoken. New acquaintances observe how existing relationships function. If they notice that others consistently respect your time, your boundaries, and your standards, they instinctively adjust their own behavior. Social environments constantly reinforce patterns that have already been established. Ultimately, the goal is never to make people fear your anger or your ability to argue. It is to make them understand that disrespect carries an unavoidable cost. Reduced access to your attention, your trust, your presence, and your opportunities. Attention is one of the most valuable currencies you possess. Once you stop spending it on those who disregard your value, you send a message that requires no dramatic confrontation. The people who genuinely respect you will naturally remain close, while those who relied on your endless tolerance will slowly disappear, leaving behind relationships built not on obligation or fear, but on mutual respect and clearly understood boundaries. Power is often misunderstood as constant visibility. Many people believe that to command respect, they must always be available, always responding, always explaining, and always proving their worth. In reality, the opposite is often true. Human beings naturally assign greater value to what is limited. What is constantly available becomes familiar, and what becomes too familiar is often taken for granted. Scarcity changes perception. When your attention, approval, and presence are not freely given to everyone, people begin to recognize their value. This is not about playing childish games or manipulating emotions. It is about understanding one of the oldest psychological principles. People respect what they fear losing. One of the reasons some individuals are consistently disrespected is that they make themselves emotionally predictable. Everyone knows exactly how they will react. A criticism will trigger anger. A compliment will earn immediate trust. A moment of silence will create anxiety. Once people can accurately predict your emotional responses, they gain influence over your behavior. Predictability becomes a weakness because it provides others with a map of your mind. Those who understand this dynamic become careful not to reveal every thought, every plan, or every emotion the moment it appears. The most influential people throughout history understood the value of mystery. They spoke less than expected. They revealed only what was necessary. They allowed others to wonder rather than explaining everything. This uncertainty creates psychological weight. When people cannot fully predict someone, they naturally pay closer attention. They observe more carefully, speak more cautiously, and think twice before crossing boundaries. Mystery is not deception. It is disciplined restraint. It reflects confidence in the idea that your value does not depend on constant exposure. Consider how conversations often unfold. Some people rush to fill every silence because silence makes them uncomfortable. They reveal personal details too quickly, share every opinion without invitation, and explain every decision before anyone even questions it. Others quietly observe. They listen more than they speak. They reveal information gradually. The second person usually appears more confident because they demonstrate that they are not desperate for approval. Their silence communicates security. They are comfortable allowing others to wonder instead of constantly seeking validation. Scarcity also applies to your availability. If people know they can interrupt you whenever they wish, cancel plans without consequence, or demand your time at any moment, they unconsciously begin valuing that time less. The person who always says yes often receives the least appreciation. This is because unlimited access reduces perceived value. On the other hand, someone who carefully protects their schedule and chooses commitments thoughtfully teaches others that their time is meaningful. Respect grows where clear priorities exist. Another powerful element is emotional unpredictability, not in the sense of being unstable, but in refusing to react according to other people's expectations. If someone insults you expecting an argument and instead receives calm indifference, they lose control of the interaction. If someone expects desperation after withdrawing attention and instead finds quiet confidence, their assumptions collapse. This unpredictability forces people to constantly reassess their strategies. They realize they cannot manipulate someone whose reactions are guided by principles rather than impulse. Many confuse unpredictability with inconsistency, yet the two are entirely different. Inconsistent people change according to emotion. Unpredictable people remain consistent in values while remaining impossible to manipulate emotionally. Their standards never change, but the methods through which they enforce those standards cannot be anticipated. Sometimes they respond immediately, sometimes they simply walk away, sometimes they say nothing at all. Because every response is intentional rather than emotional, others learn that guessing their behavior is nearly impossible. There is another reason scarcity increases respect. It demonstrates independence. People are naturally drawn toward those who appear capable of living meaningful lives without constant external validation. Someone who can enjoy solitude, pursue personal goals, and remain emotionally balanced without needing continuous attention communicates quiet strength. This independence creates attraction because it signals abundance rather than neediness. Those who desperately chase acceptance unintentionally communicate that acceptance is their source of identity. Those who possess identity independent of others become difficult to control. This principle extends beyond relationships into professional life. Employees who consistently produce valuable work without seeking endless recognition often command greater long-term respect than those who constantly advertise every accomplishment. Leaders who speak only when necessary are frequently listened to more carefully than leaders who speak endlessly. Friends who maintain healthy personal boundaries are appreciated more than those who sacrifice everything to remain included. Scarcity increases value because it forces people to recognize what they previously assumed would always be available. Ultimately, creating an aura of scarcity and unpredictability is not about manipulating people into chasing you. It is about refusing to make yourself emotionally cheap. Your attention, trust, loyalty, and presence are valuable resources. When they are offered with discernment instead of desperation, people instinctively recognize their worth. They become more thoughtful in how they treat you because they understand that access to your life is neither automatic nor permanent. That realization quietly transforms the balance of every relationship, making respect the natural response rather than something you constantly have to demand. Most people believe consequences must be loud to be effective. They imagine shouting, arguing, threatening, or seeking revenge as the only ways to defend themselves. In reality, the strongest consequences are often silent. A person who constantly announces what they will do usually has less power than someone who simply acts. Silent consequences create uncertainty, and uncertainty is psychologically powerful. When people realize that disrespect leads to an immediate change in your behavior rather than an emotional argument, they begin to think carefully before repeating it. The first lesson is to stop negotiating your boundaries. If someone repeatedly ignores your limits after you have clearly communicated them, another explanation is rarely the answer. Instead, allow your actions to speak, reduce your availability, withdraw unnecessary trust, or remove yourself from situations where your dignity is compromised. These quiet decisions communicate strength far more effectively than endless debates. They show that your standards are real, not just words spoken in moments of frustrations. Silence also prevents emotional manipulation. Many disrespectful individuals seek a dramatic reaction because conflict gives them attention and control. When you refuse to participate in unnecessary arguments, you deny them the reward they expected. Your calm response forces them to confront the consequences of their own behavior instead of becoming distracted by your emotions. This shift changes the balance of power without requiring hostility. Another advantage of silent consequences is that they protect your reputation. People remember those who remain composed under pressure far more than those who lose control. Emotional outbursts may feel satisfying in the moment, but they often weaken authority in the long run. Quiet action, on the other hand, creates consistency. Others begin to understand that crossing your boundaries always leads to meaningful consequences, even if you never raise your voice. Over time, this reputation becomes stronger than any threat because it is supported by action rather than emotion. People eventually realize that your respect is valuable, but your tolerance for disrespect is limited. And once that limit is reached, your response is calm, decisive, and impossible to reverse. Real power is not built through intimidation, but through undeniable competence. People may ignore confidence that is based only on words, but they rarely dismiss someone whose skills, discipline, and results consistently speak for themselves. Every achievement strengthens your reputation, and reputation is one of the greatest forms of influence. When people know that you are reliable, capable, and difficult to replace, they naturally become more careful in how they treat you. Competence creates independence. The more valuable your knowledge and abilities become, the less you depend on the approval of others. This independence changes your behavior in subtle ways. You stop chasing validation, stop arguing to prove your worth, and stop tolerating disrespect simply to keep people around. Confidence grows from evidence, not empty affirmations. Every challenge you overcome becomes proof that your value is real. Reputation works quietly in the background. Long before someone meets you, they often hear about your character, your work ethic, or the way you handle difficult situations. A strong reputation makes people think twice before underestimating you because they know your actions consistently match your standards. This is why protecting your integrity is so important. Skills may earn opportunities, but character determines whether respect lasts. Never allow short-term emotions to damage a reputation that took years to build. Stay consistent, continue improving your abilities, and let your results speak louder than your opinions. When your competence becomes impossible to ignore, respect follows naturally, and those who once considered disrespecting you begin to understand that they are dealing with someone whose value has already been proven through action rather than words. The greatest transformation you can make is becoming someone others can no longer afford to underestimate. This does not happen through empty confidence or dramatic displays of strength. It happens through continuous growth, emotional discipline, and unwavering self-respect. Every challenge you overcome adds another layer to your character, making you stronger, wiser, and less vulnerable to manipulation. People quickly recognize when someone has developed genuine inner strength because it cannot be faked for long. Those who are constantly underestimated often seek approval by explaining themselves or proving their worth. Truly powerful individuals do the opposite. They allow their actions, consistency, and results to create their identity. Instead of reacting to every opinion, they stay focused on their long-term purpose. This calm confidence forces others to reassess their assumptions. Over time, people stop seeing them as easy targets and begin treating them with greater caution and respect. Another important habit is refusing to let setbacks define you. Every successful person has experienced criticism, rejection, and failure, yet they continued improving while others remained distracted by negativity. Resilience is intimidating because it shows that pressure cannot easily break your spirit. When people realize that neither insults nor obstacles can push you away from your goals, they understand that your strength comes from within rather than from external praise. Becoming impossible to underestimate is a lifelong process. Continue sharpening your skills, protecting your principles, and choosing discipline over comfort. The combination of competence, composure, and consistency creates a presence that commands respect without demanding it. Eventually, people become careful not because they fear your anger, but because they recognize the quiet strength of someone who knows their value and refuses to compromise it.